Right, Emily, looks like we have some people on the line, so we can
Yep. Or-
let everyone know what we're up to.
Oh, yeah, I see that now. Hi, everyone. Good evening. Thanks for joining us. We're going to give folks a few more minutes to join, and then we'll get started.
Let's run this over.
Just joining us, we're going to get started in just another couple minutes.
Oh, Emily, I don't know if I heard you.
Oh,
Now I can hear you.
okay.
No,
Oh, boy.
you're
Technology.
fine.
I'll talk louder.
There you go. Perfect.
Okay. All right.
Okay, we're just checking to make sure interpretation services are all good to go, and then we'll get started here in a minute or two. Thank you all for joining. If you didn't hear me, we're just checking to make sure interpretation services are available, and we'll start in just a second. Okay, looks like we're good to go. So take it away, Emily.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us tonight for our webinar on the Vic Trace Reservoir Replacement Project. This is the first of several community meetings and webinars we will be hosting throughout the planning of this important project. So we appreciate your time this evening. And with that, I'll pass it over to Kelly.
Thank you, Emily. Hi, everyone. My name is Kelly Bork. I'm a senior project engineer with the City of Santa Barbara, and I am the project manager for the Vic Trace Reservoir Replacement Project. Interpretación disponible, elija su idioma preferido. We have Spanish interpretation available, so please select your preferred language on the bottom of your screen. All right, so welcome to our webinar. This is for, like Emily said, the Vic Trace Reservoir Replacement Project. This evening, we have an hour allocated, so from 5:30 to 6:30. Our agenda for today is we'll be introducing the team, so the team members for the project. We'll be going through some slides to speak about the project, and then lastly, leaving about 30 minutes or so, 30 to 40 minutes for question and answers. So let's start with team introductions. For the project team, it's a big roster. The owner of this project is Water Resources, City of Santa Barbara Water Resources. Joshua Hadmark's on the team, Water Resource Manager, Matt Ward, Water System Manager, myself. Also, our engineering team is co-managing this project on behalf of the city. So we have Phil Maldonado, Ashley Sizo, and then we have Lauren Bennett with public outreach and Teresa doing Spanish interpretation. Our consultants on this project, so folks the city has hired to work with us for the successful completion of this project over the next several years. We have our designer, Kennedy Jenks. We have Don Barrazas on the call. He'll join us for the question and answer session to help answer questions with me about the project. We have our outreach team, Katz and Associates. That's Emily here. And for the environmental work on this project, we have teamed up with Rincon Consultants. Other collaborators on this project within the city are the Information or IT Department, Parks and Recreation, the Fire Department, Sustainability and Resilience, as well as some coordination with other Mesa area projects like the Cliff Drive Vision Zero project. So goals for tonight's webinar, we first and foremost want to share project information that we have available as of today. Secondly, we want to hear from all of you, your feedback about the project, any questions you have, any concerns. If it's something you don't want to have answered today, you can, I'll be providing an email address and my phone number. Third is to be in touch and make connections with all of you. And we're happy you're here. It shows that you're interested in the project. So we hope to bring you with us along over the next couple of years. And then lastly, to be transparent and earn your trust. So this slide, just to really zoom out on the city's water system and where we're talking about Vic Trace Reservoir. The city's water system is one of the most complex in the state. We receive water, what we call surface water, so water from rain or rivers or lakes from the State Water Project, from Lake Cachuma and Gibraltar Reservoir. All that water is funneled to our Cater water treatment plant where it is treated for drinking water purposes. From there, it gets distributed to pump stations, pipelines, reservoirs, all the facilities that allow that water to get to your home. That is where Vic Trace is in the mix. It is treated drinking water. And then from there, it goes out to wastewater treatment, our recycled water system, and thereafter. So this project is critical in that it is just one piece of the larger infrastructure system that we support, and happy to introduce you to the project coming up next. So the Vic Trace Reservoir is located in the Mesa neighborhood on the map shown here. It's located between Meigs Road and Cliff Drive. It was built in the 1950s. It's reaching about 70 years old now. The lifespan of these tanks is usually around 50 to 75 years. It's a critical storage facility in that it stores 10 million gallons of drinking water locally. So in town, should we need it to meet demands, meet fire demands, local emergencies. And it also serves 60,000 people, or 70% of the city. Water comes from Cater, the water treatment plant, to this reservoir, to downtown, the west side, and Mesa neighborhoods. So if you're like me, you probably haven't seen Vic Trace Reservoir before or up close. I hadn't before I learned about this project. These pictures here show existing site conditions. We have the view here from La Coronilla. That's the entrance to the reservoir site. We also have the view shown here of Dolores Drive. This is the view looking up at the hillside. You can see some of the radio tower infrastructure we have on site. This is from La Coronilla Park. If you're not down street side, this is the view from up above. This is the tank. This is what we're looking at is the metallic roof on top of the reservoir. The reservoir itself is about 20 feet deep. So what you're seeing is a partially buried reservoir that holds the 10 million gallons of drinking water. And if I'm pausing, it's because I'm making sure that we're doing our Spanish translation in full. So apologies for the pauses, but they're important. So the project objectives for this project are some of these listed here. First and foremost, we are replacing aging infrastructure. As I mentioned, this reservoir was built in the 1950s and was not meant to last, more than that 75 years. So it's been identified in the city's capital improvement plan for many, many, many years. Secondly, there are many costly repairs that are just starting to add up like a car. There's a certain point where fixing it just no longer makes sense, and we're at that time. Some other items, we're addressing seismic risk. We're going to bring the new tank up to code. It'll help maintain water quality. We're also looking to enhance stormwater capture on site. So that means capturing and treating the runoff that's generated on site to make sure we are being nice to our neighbors around that area. And then these last two, we want to tighten site security. We know security is a concern for local residents in the area. And there's new regulations coming out that say that we need to have more robust security of our critical water sites. And then hopefully in summary, this all just shows that we need to make the site more resilient now and into the future. So our work to date, since we set out to do this project, we've done dozens of site visits. We've performed, seismic geotechnical studies. We've also performed some preliminary biological and cultural studies of the site. We've started investigating traffic and construction impacts. We've done some hydraulic modeling to make sure we can take this tank offline during construction. We've looked into different funding avenues. We've looked at cost estimates, so I'll be speaking to that in a couple slides. We've also conducted lots of interviews with interested parties and neighbors in the area and put together a strategic communications plan. So currently, as of today, we're at what's called a 15% design phase. Engineers typically work from like 0 to 100. So we're only 15% of the way there. Which is the perfect time to come to the community, to our collaborators, to discuss, what do you think? It's a good time where we can consider changes and incorporate them without them being too costly down the road. So as of today, what's listed here is kind of what we know to be true, what we have designed. We know that we will be replacing the existing partially buried tank with 2 underground buried tanks. I'll have a picture of that next. We'll be replacing the buildings on site that support the reservoir and house some other water facilities. We're going to modernize the radio equipment on site and consolidate a lot of that old infrastructure. We're going to restore safer access roads. We're going to install new fire and drought resistant landscaping. And like I said, we are going to be improving the drainage. We'll also install some new fencing and enhance security. And then lastly, apart from the site, we have a lot of pipelines coming in and out of the reservoir along the streets in the neighborhood. Those were also installed in the 1950s. So it makes sense for us to just come in here and replace all of those all at the same time. So the next couple slides I'm going to show are our renderings. So these are illustrations of our design as of today, which again is only at 15%. So similar to when you build a hotel, these are renderings to help illustrate how the project's going to look post-construction. These show what you're looking at is, here I'll use my cursor, 2 buried tanks underneath this top terrace, a wraparound access road, and then another wraparound access road, both for water distribution and fire personnel. Here's another shot from above. What this infographic shows is just how we're going to use some of those areas we have. In dark blue, we have the potential, we're looking at solar, sort of any other beneficial uses of this site. Solar is one of those that could work on top of the reservoirs. We also have areas for future repairs and maintenance, that space dedicated for water distribution's team. And then that access road that I mentioned here in orange, that's for fire personnel and also water operations staff and for security purposes. And this is a view from the driveway on La Coronilla. You can see it'll be very difficult to actually see the reservoir from the street. The driveway will be improved. There'll be a new fence, but hopefully once we're gone, it'll go back to a nice, somewhat quiet neighbor. Here is a map of the pipelines that I was speaking to. So what this shows is there's a major pipeline along La Coronilla that will be replaced. There's also going to be new pipelines installed along Dolores Drive and Ricardo Drive, or Ricardo Avenue, excuse me. So if you live along those areas, you can expect some construction impacts just similar to the pipeline replacement that is around town typically. So in summary, this project achieves a lot of benefits for the city and the community. One is making this reservoir seismically up to date. It'll meet today's codes, which are meant to last, to the next 50, 100 years. We'll be improving the site drastically from how it is today. We'll be improving the security of the site and the safety for city personnel and fire personnel to travel around the site, and then making the site more resilient itself, but also making the city's water system as a whole more resilient, making sure that this asset is hardened and available for us for the next 100, maybe even 200 years. The project timeline in all goes from 2024 to 2031. So it's about a 7-year project, but that's starting from day one to end. We're currently in the design phase. We're about to start off the environmental review phase. So we will be hosting more workshops specific to design and the environment. And then we have construction starting likely in 2028, going through 2031. So a 3-year construction window, but that doesn't mean we'll be in your front yard for 3 years. It just means the project as a whole will take 3 years. So when it gets closer, we'll really fine tune the sequencing of all these projects and let you know more exactly sort of what the impacts will be in your neighborhood. Here are some pictures I grabbed to help illustrate some of the construction impacts that you may see down the road. Um, the picture showing the reservoir is the concrete pouring of the reservoir. That'll be mostly on site. But there is equipment that's going to be through your neighborhood, concrete trucks, construction equipment. And we'll, like I mentioned, we know some of that today, but we plan to really start sharing a lot of that information. If you have feedback or questions about construction, we're happy to answer them based on the knowledge we know today, but that will certainly be an ongoing conversation. And then this other picture shown here is water main replacement in town. So this is just to depict sort of the level of impact for the pipeline replacement in that neighborhood. And budget, the current construction cost estimate, so just the construction piece, is 113 million. With other costs, that brings the project total up to almost $130 million. That's the construction cost estimate now at 15%. We will be doing some value engineering to really fine tune that number. For funding, we are investigating and likely going to be applying for low interest loans that are offered by the state and some bond measures as well. For community engagement, like what we're doing now, today's feedback will help inform future project plans and the design moving forward. We will have future public meetings centered around all sorts of topics, environmental, land use. We'll have both community public outreach meetings, but we're also going through the same city process that any development would go through. So planning commission, water commission, lots of meetings. So if you would like to keep up to date with whenever those meetings are, please subscribe to the project's you can go to the project website and hit subscribe, or feel free to send send an email to the project email address, which is victrace@santabarbaraca.gov. So some community feedback we've received to date. We've heard from you all so far that you want this to be a transparent process and have access to information such as our website. We've heard that you want to know how this project will be funded and how it may impact rates. And it goes without saying, definitely construction impacts. And then lastly, some sustainability features, which I would say is a catch-all for, wildlife, biological, and those sort of items. So for today, we would love to hear your feedback on any of these topics, any other topics, any questions you have, and we'll do the best to either answer them or note them for the future. So with that, here is the contact information for the project. My phone number directly, the project email address, which again is victrace@santabarbaraca.gov. We have a project website. On there, you can put in your email and subscribe, and you'll get all the updates regarding the project. And with that, I think we're ready to open up the Q&A section. So Emily, let's see what questions we have.
Yeah, thanks, Kelly. We do have a few questions, and just a reminder that if you want to submit a question, just at the bottom of the screen, you can type it in. Just click on that Q&A box, and then we'll be able to see your questions. So the first question that we have, and we'll start with Kelly, is, will you do anything to improve security at the reservoir? There was mention of some burglaries on La Vista del Oceano. So.
Yes, thank you for your question. Yes, we are aware that there has been trespassing on the site, and that security is a big concern for this neighborhood. We will be securing the site. We do not know at this time the extent of any new fencing, if your property actually borders the site or not. That is something we also want to hear back from residents from. But we do know that there's going to be more security at our entrance, entering and exiting the site, sort of as it gets closer to those open areas around the property, like along Dolores and La Vista del Oceano. The way Matt Ward, our water system manager, also speaks to this. We would like the security at this site to be on the same level as our Cater water treatment plant, which is very secure. Because this facility serves, 60,000 people in the city, it really needs to be protected against any malevolent acts, trespassers. I didn't have time to really mention this in the presentation, but we also have critical public communication infrastructure. So the police and fire emergency systems also have facilities here for all their comms. So it just speaks to how critical the site is, and we will do our best to make it more secure.
And just since we're talking about security, there was kind of a follow-up question related just in terms of what the city is going to do in the meantime before, before construction of this project is complete.
Oh, sure. That's a great question, and I'm glad if that's, what the community is looking for, that's great. We can certainly think about ways to make the site more secure now until 2028. Don might have some ideas for how we could maybe address that sort of sooner. I think there are opportunities for us to like do small improvements in the meantime, like maybe installing a better gate in the meantime. But Don, have you seen that kind of on your other projects, how to protect the site even maybe during construction too, before we even install these fences?
So what I would comment on is I think there are two elements of security. And the first element of security is trying to protect the water supply and the city's water resources on the site. We want to really make sure that contamination of the water supply is not compromised by intruders and other rodents and animals getting to the site. We are aware that there are issues with the fencing at the site, and there seems to be a little bit of a different assortment of different types of fencing around the site. And some of that fencing has been compromised, especially coming up through, oftentimes through Dolores and through other private properties. And so I think the effort is going to be one to look at where we have compromises in the fencing and look to come up with some uniform fencing throughout the entire site that seals off the site, that protects the site and makes it more difficult for somebody to come through the site. And then I think the second thing we'll be looking at is there'll be measures evaluated for protecting the water supply associated with oftentimes today it's a combination of locking the site down. It's improving intrusion alarms on the site so that the city is notified when somebody is attempting to be on the site or crossing into the site. And thirdly, it's an effort to put some surveillance camera work oftentimes on the site so that the city can monitor the site. Oftentimes the surveillance cameras are directed at areas like the reservoir and the entrance and exits from the site far more than oftentimes the perimeter boundaries of the site.
Oh, we can't hear you, Emily, but I can always take over if needed. No, maybe try getting a little closer. No, that's okay. We can manage tech. Don and I can take it until you come back in, Emily. Let's see. This is a good question for both Don and I too, is how will the city's water needs be met during construction? So I can sort of kick it off and Don can finish with the details, but the city had previously done a lot of hydraulic modeling, so water modeling to show how the system would work without VicTrace. So if we were to take it offline, what would the system do? Those sort of those needs, like how much extra storage we would need, were identified years and years and years ago, and some of those infrastructure pieces are already in play. Like for example, we have a project going on up at Cater here soon that'll actually expand the amount of storage we have available, water storage available up at Cater, and that'll help mitigate when we take VicTrace offline. Don, do you have any other details for that?
I think the things to keep in mind are, again, recognizing that the city underwent back in 2020, 2019, an entire water distribution infrastructure plan. And as part of that plan, they looked at the water demands in the system at the current time, and then they projected them out to 2050. And the city has more storage in its water system today than its maximum demands. It has quite a large storage surplus. So the city is able to take different reservoirs offline to do maintenance on the reservoirs, and they still have the capacity within the distribution system to store the water necessary to meet the demands within the water distribution system. So I think that's important to keep in mind. And then I think the other thing is you might say, well, if we have excess capacity, why are we building the reservoir? And again, remember the city has a lot of older reservoirs in their system, and VicTrace has been identified as the first of several reservoirs to be upgraded and replaced because of the deteriorating age and the life of the reservoirs. And the intent is to take a reservoir like VicTrace and replace it now, so that later on the city may be able to discontinue 2 or 3 older reservoirs in the city without having to upgrade them.
And just to summarize and make it clear, everyone in this neighborhood and the city will have water service during this project. The only time where you maybe wouldn't have water service is maybe if we're tying your service over to a new water line. So it'd be very small, very minor, and you'd receive a lot of advance notice, but there are going to be no planned major outages. We plan to continue to serve water during this project. Emily, are you back? Can we do a test?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Perfect. Okay. What is strange is somehow the Q&A is not showing up for me.
Taking it, that's fine.
Oh my goodness. I don't know why. That is very strange. But
no worries. I will take it. So the next question is in the interim, so I'm assuming before construction, will the fire department be trimming the growth at the site? We have not engaged the fire department directly about this, but it's a great recommendation, and we've already started engaging with the fire department just about fire access on site. So we will bring that up with them. I know that they've been going around to other city properties and doing some thinning for like wildfire mitigation. So that is a good comment, and we'll see what we can do there. All right. Next question is, the rendering appears to show lawn and trees that might need lots of water. Could native plants be used? Lots of local landscape designers have expertise in creating beauty with minimal irrigation needed. Thank you. Great question. We do have a landscape plan currently that was reflected in the rendering that we showed. Don could speak to it more, but not only have we strived to do native plants, fire-resistant plants, drought-resistant plants, but the city also requires a lot of this. So new developments have to meet a lot of these new rules and regs, and it's just something that we also want to do on site. So Don, could you speak more to our landscape designer in the landscape plan?
Yeah, so I think important to recognize what you see in the renderings is the initial preliminary landscaping plan that has been developed for the site. And this preliminary landscaping plan has been developed utilizing a local landscape architect. It's also been developed with input received by the local fire department. And the landscaping has been laid out on the site to create 3 different zones for fire protection for the reservoir site. Those zones allow us to keep large trees away from buildings on the site, and to create zones that will allow firefighters to adequately protect the site and the properties surrounding the site. The next thing I want to point out is that all the vegetation and all of the plantings and everything that will be brought into the VicTrace Reservoir site is all native growth material. It's all drought tolerant material, and it's all material that will only utilize irrigation to establish it, and then it will be basically material that does not require any irrigation after it's been established. And I think the other thing to keep in mind is that we've laid out so that most of the vegetation on the site does not include vegetation that's going to require extensive maintenance. It's going to be low growth types of materials and ground covers, and not things like grasses. Even though oftentimes the renderings make things look like grass, we have to sort of play a little bit with the renderings to make things look as realistic and to understand the differences in the types of landscaping that you see. But there's no intent to place grass on this site or anything that's going to require extensive maintenance like mowing and upkeep of that type of a nature for the city's parks and water operation staff.
Great. Okay, Emily, I think you're okay to join in now.
Yes, the
Perfect.
questions have popped back up into my queue. Oh no. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yep.
Okay,
Go
great.
ahead.
No, I wasn't sure. Okay, so the next question is, how is the decommissioning process going to be conducted? So maybe Dawn could start talking about that.
So the Victrace Reservoir decommissioning is really going to be a process in which we isolate the reservoir from the distribution system, and then that reservoir will be drained, and anything inside the reservoir will be removed. The reservoir, while the reservoir is drained and while it's isolated from the distribution system, water will be rerouted around the Victrace Reservoir so that the existing demand within the system is met from the supply side of Victrace Reservoir. And then the process will begin to demolish the existing reservoir. And then once the reservoir has been demolished and removed from the site will actually become a pretty quiet site after that. And a lengthy process will go on excavating out the site and constructing the replacement reservoirs. There are also several appurtenances that go along with the replacement reservoirs. So support buildings, as Kelly has indicated, and pumping stations and numerous pipelines surrounding the Victrace Reservoir site that will be replaced and bypassing the reservoir site and allowing us to improve the flow of water back out of the Victrace Reservoir and into the distribution system once the reservoir is completed. The reservoir will be basically reconstructed, and then earthwork operations will go on to backfill the reservoir and bury it so that it's completely buried. And then site work will be undertaken to construct the terracing, the retaining walls, and many of the access roads that you see on the site and around the site. Eventually, the reservoir, will be placed back into operation, filled with water, and put back online. And the site will be basically turned back over to the city from the contractor that's building the new reservoir.
And we will, just another plug here, like now that we've sort of finished what we want, well, not finished, but now that we have an idea of what the site will look like, the fact that we're building 2 reservoirs underground, we can start really honing in on the sequencing of construction, how it's going to work. We're, going to start talking to contractors about how that would happen. So we're really soon, I hope, going to be able to start really sharing a lot of those details and better know, 2028, 29, or 30, when are we doing what? And our goal is by the time you get there, you should have a pretty clear idea of all the sequencing of what's going to happen over those 3 years.
And just kind of a follow-up question about the decommissioning process. Can Kelly, you or Dawn talk a little bit about will there be any impact for water pressure for the neighborhoods below Victrace during that time? Or what we know?
Yeah, Dawn can start. We've started looking into sort of these things and doing some hydraulic modeling, but We are thinking about sort of rearranging some pressure zones in the area so that you might see small pressure changes. That's what we're investigating right now. So we'll be able to better speak to that soon. But we're trying to minimize it as much as we can, any pressure changes, and making sure there's no big water hammer. Don, do you have any more details than that?
You know, the things I would tend to point out is that the homes that are directly surrounding the Victrace Reservoir don't actually get water from Victrace Reservoir. They receive water that's pumped out of Victrace Reservoir, and it's also water that's pumped from another pump station in the city's distribution system quite a ways to the west of the Victrace Reservoir site. And that pump station will not be impacted during the construction of the reservoir. And so the supply of that water will continue pretty much unnoticed from the Victrace Reservoir. Victrace Reservoir tends to supply a lot of water to the areas quite a bit lower down the hill from Victrace Reservoir, closer to Cliff Drive. And those areas, again, tend to have water reduced in its pressure quite a bit from Victrace Reservoir. So the pressure is already exceedingly high, and we're dropping down that pressure as it goes into the distribution system from Victrace Reservoir.
Great, thank you. Let's see, I'm seeing several questions about construction. Let's see, sort of truck routes, hours, how many days of work for the project, noise limits, time restrictions.
Sure.
Question about if properties have damage during construction. So just kind of roll that all up into one. What do we know now?
We know a lot, so maybe we can break that up a little bit. We will be meeting city code. So, the city has rules and regs for noise, for time of construction work. We're going to be meeting hopefully most of that. Obviously, when you're pouring concrete, there's a certain extent where it is a continuous operation. You don't just want to do a bunch of little chunks in the reservoir, like we'll have to pour a whole slab, right? So there might be some, very few, hopefully, instances where we'll be deviating from the norm. And to say what the norm is, construction hours in the city are usually 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. It's usually an 8-hour workday in the middle there. And let's see, noise, there are, noise requirements. A lot of these, we hope to have really focused workshops coming up where we can go through each one of these in detail and hear feedback from the public on how loud is demolition going to be, and we'll be able to answer that when it gets closer. But this is another plug. This project will also be going through the CEQA process. So we anticipate doing an environmental impact review. And for those not familiar with that process, it's not just environmental impacts like biological resources on site. It also requires us to study how we're going to mitigate noise, air quality. The list is really, really long. But that EIR will go into very finite detail about how we're going to mitigate each of those impacts. And we're starting that process hopefully this fall. So answers, questions and answers for that will hopefully be, better answered soon. But Don's done a million of these projects. So he can follow me up with sort of, based on his experience in these projects up and down the state of California, what different mitigations have occurred to sort of help ease the pain in the neighborhood.
The two things that, again, I'll build on here is this is pretty much going to be handled the same as all projects in the city. So again, you should anticipate construction Monday through Friday. You should anticipate construction from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. Typically, there won't be construction on the weekends. Typically, there won't be construction on holidays. And the routes, we are just starting again the process of looking at traffic control, traffic routing, traffic trips throughout the construction area. And we'll be working on traffic planning, and there will be complete traffic plans developed for the project's construction and not just the Victrace Reservoir's construction, but the pipeline work in the streets surrounding the site. And I think the other thing I want to point out is that off the streets surrounding the site, traffic will be designated and laid out for the construction vehicles in order to provide the safest approach for construction for the community. And so we've already looked at certain intersections that surround the site, and we want to create safe flows of traffic that will allow the construction to go on and to not allow truck traffic that is large trucks to have to make what we would call dangerous traffic control maneuvers. So again, we'll be controlling the direction and the flow of traffic to minimize challenging sites. There are steep roads in the area around the reservoir in certain locations, and there are also challenging intersections. And that'll all be taken into consideration with the traffic plans for construction of the site. I will say that again, there are multiple routes to the Victrace Reservoir site. All different types of routes will be utilized throughout construction, and that is because some routes that will be utilized during construction may be impacted later by pipeline construction, and so they will be interrupted for their use for traffic construction. And so we'll probably be utilizing several of the different streets that lead in and out of the Victrace Reservoir site from both Cliff, Meigs, and the other streets, the main arteries that serve and come through the neighborhood streets into the Victrace Reservoir site.
Yep. Oh, bummer, Emily. I think you're still having sound issues. But no worries. I'll pick up.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, there you go. There you are.
Am I back? Okay.
Yes.
Gosh, this is so bizarre. This has never happened to me. Okay, so
fine.
the next, let's just keep rolling. The next question, has it been considered to allow homes that back up to the reservoir to have an easement for solar panels? So Kelly, maybe you want to start with that?
Yeah, I haven't heard that before. We will note that down, but I will say we are engaged with sustainability and resilience. So the Sustainability and Resilience Department here at the city, and they kind of take the lead on, Santa Barbara Clean Energy, Santa Barbara Community Choice Energy. And we're investigating, the extent to which we can have solar on site, where we could either power our facilities on site and hope maybe one day if the electric grid can make it work, exporting solar to, basically generate those clean energy molecules right here in the city for folks in the city. So we haven't considered that, but we will note that down. I'll pick up the next one. Will there be a pedestrian walkway around the area as there is at the Montecito Reservoir? That is Sheffield Reservoir, over on the Riviera. There is not one designed at the moment. If that is something you're interested in, feel free to, we'll note that comment down and continue to be engaged. We're hoping that we can keep the site secure, not only for the protection of the water supply for the asset, but also for residents in that area to not have trespassing. But we are happy to hear any feedback, both for that and for La Coronilla Park next door. Okay, let's see. Scrolling through and seeing which questions. Oh, okay. Will this project be subject to project labor agreements at the city? Yes. The city has the workforce. I'm blanking on the name right now, but we do have a local workforce agreement policy, and this will be triggered, so we will be meeting that policy. Community workforce agreement, that's what it is. The next one, there is an area behind a number of houses on La Cornea that is set up to be decommissioned. That is correct. Oh, the question keeps bouncing around. There it is. Will this be conducted while the reservoir is under construction or during its decommission? So that we do not know at this time, but we will be engaging a contractor soon. And Don's team is also looking into the sequencing of, do we replace that pipeline along La Cornea first before we deconstruct the reservoir? Do we construct the reservoir first and then do that pipeline? It would be our goal to not do it at the same time, because that presents a risk to the water system to have, two critical pieces offline. But Don's team has looked a little bit into the sequencing of things. Don, do you want to elaborate on that?
What I would really point out here is if you're aware, and many of you as owners are aware that you have a water line that's in your backyard or in an easement that passes through your backyard. We know that there are some on La Cornea. There are some headed down off of the Victrace Reservoir site to the south towards Vista del Oceano, La Vista del Oceano, and cross Ricardo Avenue. And again, we'll be replacing many of these pipelines and putting them back into the public right of way for the protection of the pipelines, for the ability to maintain the pipelines going forward in the future, and for the ability to prevent having pipelines that are underneath people's basically private residences in the future. The intent is where we are abandoning these pipelines is to abandon them in place. There won't be anybody effort made to dig up these pipelines. So you shouldn't expect to have construction behind your homes or in your backyards associated with these pipelines. And if there are surface features to these pipelines, we may be looking to remove those surface features and bury things so that there's no future surface features from these pipelines. And some of the pipelines, we are looking to replace them in place. And so those will also have a different construction technique. But in general, should not have, it's not currently envisioned that we will have any construction outside of the public right-of-ways where these pipelines are located in easements.
That's right. So construction at this time, as we know today, it should be limited to the Victrace property and to like La Cornea Road in Dolores, and maybe some periphery streets if it makes sense, like Ricardo, La Vista del Oceano. But those are some of the items, like Don mentioned, that we're investigating now, sort of what makes sense for us. Sort of not only cost, but also making sure impact wise that we trying to avoid being in your backyards is the ultimate goal. Don't see any other questions coming through, but we do have about 10 more minutes left. So please feel free to type in any more questions. And like I said, if you don't have any today, but if you think of some tomorrow, I'll pull up our information here as we get to a close. We have a project email address, victrace@santabarbaraca.gov. So you can feel free to send any follow-up questions or comments to that email address. You can also call me. My phone number 805-564-5579. If we don't have the answer for you, we will note it down and get back to you. Again, I said earlier, but if you'd like to be in touch about updates to this project, please subscribe. The city's website has a great subscription feature where you can go to the city website for this project, santabarbaraca.gov/victrace, enter in your email, and you'll get notifications for any updates to the project. Oh, there's a request in here to please send contact info to all attendees. We will try and do that. I believe we get emails here on Zoom, so I'm happy to reach out to those who attended with our contact information, and it's also shown here. This recording will also be posted to the city's website, the city's project website, so it can be looked back on for those who either couldn't make it tonight or to reference in the future. Oh, here's another great question also too, as we close. Can you tell us about who Vic Trace was? Vic Trace is Victor Trace. He was a city water superintendent from 1900 to the 1930s. He died before the reservoir was built, so it was likely built or named in his honor after his death. But it's our understanding that his family was local, and his family is at the Santa Barbara Cemetery. So we have no intention on changing the name, but he is a city water worker from the early 1900s. Okay, just seeing if any new questions are coming through. Thank you so much for those of you who did submit questions. Those were really great. We're eager to keep answering them more. I'll also say, I think our next public meeting, apart from some visits maybe to Water Commission here and there, will likely be in the fall to start our CEQA process. So even if you're not familiar with CEQA, we encourage you to sort of tune in, because it's a great opportunity to not only learn more about where we're at in the project, but to also provide comments, to just seek a lot of the info that some of you were asking for today, like about noise and traffic. That is all studied in the EIR process. Okay, I'll give it just a couple more minutes if there's any last questions. Otherwise, I think we can close. Thank you again for attending. This will be posted on the city's website. And yeah, I guess that's it. Thank you so much, everyone. I think we'll go ahead and close. Thanks, Dawn and Emily, for helping us out. And big thanks to Teresa for providing Spanish services. So have a good night, everyone.
Thank you.